Hey there, last wrap-up video of the class. Woo-hoo. Almost done, guys, almost done. What I want to do with video is to talk about one issue, because most of the things that I wanted you to talk about in the discussion you already have. And I don't think I need to be reiterating most of the things because you focus on those things. But I want you to keep one thing in mind, and that thing is context, both geographical context and historical context. You notice how when she's talking about cities, she talks about New York mostly because that's her experience, and she talks about St. Louis, and she talks about a few other cities because she's sort of drawing information about other places. But not everything that she talks about applies to every space. Suburban spaces and urban spaces have many similarities, and actually there are many urban theorists that don't want to think of them as separate. But the dynamics of people in those spaces are different, and many of us live in suburbs. I live in a suburb, and many of you seem to do as well. Many of the things that we have been talking about doesn't quite apply in certain cases. And so I want you to keep that in mind, especially when you're writing the Sesame Street paper, because we're in a very specific urban space. That's really quite important to keep in mind. I want to make sure that we separate the idea of Jane Jacobs and the playground and our notion of parks. They're not the same. She's talking about a really urban space. There are no trees. There is no greenery. There are a few spaces for children to play, seesaws and swings and things like that. But we're not talking about a park. When she talks about a playground, she means it's sort of like flat cement, maybe a basketball court, a few places for children to play, and that is it. And so don't confuse those two, because those two are different spaces. And so when we talk about Millennium Park, when we talk about Grand Park, those are not playgrounds in the way that Jane Jacobs think about it. So keep that in mind, because it's going to be useful when we talk about Sesame Street, because we're going to see playgrounds in Sesame Street. And I want you to sort of connect those two. And so keep that in mind. I've given you quite a bit of information about the paper, so I don't think I need to add anything in here between the video instructions and the extra instructions that I put in there. So go ahead and write. Go ahead and write. I wanted to point out one last thing that I thought was a really revealing moment in the essay, and nobody pointed it out. I know that we have a little bit of an extension until midnight, but at least so far, right now at 6 o'clock at night, nobody has talked about. And it's that scene when she walks by the Puerto Rican neighborhood in New York, and she notices how the public space is used by all of the members of that community. And I want you to think about that moment as sort of a moment of revelation for her. If I could use a religious word, it's an epiphany. It's a moment where something manifests to her about how we can actually rethink the idea of the street, the idea of the sidewalk. She is coming from a reaction against urban planning, thinking that all we need to do is create spaces for children and everything will be solved. And there was one phrase that I loved about your discussions, and it was public responsibility. And this is something that comes from her, but I love that you picked it up, about the community having a responsibility for the raising of children. It's creating sort of a family that is not a blood family, but a social family that protects each other. Once again, a really important thing for you to keep in mind for Sesame Street that might be really useful for it. All right? It's been a pleasure. If you want to stop by my office and say hello in the fall, I would love that. I would love to know who you are and chat for a little bit. I know that some of you are graduating, so I might never see you again. Have a wonderful life. I hope that this class helped you in some way, and I hope that this class was both interesting and entertaining and challenging and fun. That's sort of what I try to do. I love teaching, and I hope that shows, because I really enjoy doing this class. All right, I'm going to stop talking. Bye.